This is the Free Body Podcast, a podcast for every body. Join us as we share the body stories of folks from all walks of life and deep dive into how we can turn to movement, creativity, and connection to heal while navigating a wounded world. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and subscribe to us on YouTube at Free Body Podcast. Please share us with a friend, rate, and review. Thank you for being here.
I had this realization probably literally last year, decades later, that part of why I ran so fast and jumped so high was because I had to. When I was growing up, I grew up in an area that was pretty dangerous. Mm-hmm. And I grew up sort of doing martial arts and jumping a lot and running a lot.
Yeah.
And so I have this memory of sort of kind of sprinting as fast as I could and jumping as high as I could, and to climb trees or sort of hide in spaces.
Yeah.
After school. Yeah. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say probably I have a vivid memory of seeing somebody much older than me getting beat up in the fall and getting leaves thrown on him, and then them looking up at me and me having to run as fast as I could. And I was really good at it, you know? Mm-hmm. And I know even in when I became a teenager and we'd play Manhunt or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Or we'd start doing things we weren't supposed to be doing. Right. That would lead us to be running from cops. I was never worried that we were going to get caught.
You were like, I've been here. I know exactly
how to navigate this terrain. Yeah.
How old were you when you started martial arts?
Maybe 4.
Wow, that's young.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about what led to that? Where that came from?
So my dad had a big martial arts background, and this is a bit of a rabbit hole, but
great, we love rabbit holes on the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So my dad was in a cult.
Oh my gosh.
For all of the 70s before I was born.
Wow.
Basically he basically missed his 20s.
Oh.
And the thing that lured members of this cult was martial arts. So it was a couple who had a martial arts dojo. So everybody in this cult practiced martial arts on a very regular basis. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was sort of a part of my life really early on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine.
From the time I was born, basically.
Do you remember seeing your dad when you were little practicing martial arts? Or was it just something that was talked about in the...
Yeah, it was more my dad was sort of a mystery because he was out of shape, he was overweight. It never felt like his present self was an indication of where he came from. So I don't think you'd ever get the sense that he was a martial artist.
Yeah.
But then I would speak to old friends or see old pictures, or he'd have critiques of certain things I was doing that were accurate.
Yeah. You're you know about this.
I'd be what the fuck? I remember one time my sister and I were sitting at the breakfast table with him, and he was kind of a pathological liar. Uh-huh. So you never knew, sort of Big Fish, what was real and what wasn't.
Totally.
And one time the TV was on, and there was a demonstration of multiple monks taking a huge staff with a sword blade at the end of it and trying to push it into a sensei. Yeah. And the staff bending.
Right.
And my dad was oh yeah, I used to do that. And me and my sister were get the fuck out of here. And he was I did. And he went and he found a book. And the cover of the book was the silhouette drawings of people doing this. Wow. And my dad he was bald, but he had hair on the sides, and he was overweight. And the silhouettes literally had like multiple Asian men with full heads of hair bent over like this, holding the staff, and one fat guy in the middle with just the top of his bald head. And my sister and I were like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, I told you I did this.
What was that like for you to like take that in? That was your dad.
I don't know.
It's like invincible, amazing.
Yeah.
Like to be able to do that is like next level, right?
Yeah, maybe, but again, it was like, it was always muddied with other things that were untrue.
Right.
And so it was hard to ever be fully impressed because it was sort of like, what's not true about this? Or like, how did you scheme your way into this Shaolin tempo? Like, how did you do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like an unreliable narrator a little bit.
100%.
When did you start becoming more conscious and aware of the effect martial arts was having on you? Because I have to imagine it had some effect.
I think that, first of all, I really loved it.
Yeah.
So I was kind of obsessed with it. I would watch like old kung fu movies on a regular basis, and I'd like go to Blockbuster and just fill up on like foreign kung fu films.
That's awesome.
And I was a ninja like literally every Halloween. Like literally every single Halloween.
So sweet. So sweet.
I was a ninja.
Yeah, man.
And so I think it also, maybe when I was like in second grade. How old are you in second grade?
7, 8?
Something like that.
Something around there,
Yeah, so I think that's when it started to sort of take some kind of like solidified
mm-hmm.
shape for me, where it had a bit of an impact. I remember there was a kid who was my age who was coming into a martial arts class for the first time, and we were just doing stretches, and he went to try to get into any semblance of a side split,
mm-hmm.
and he was so frustrated. He was 7 years old,
yeah,
and he started hysterically crying from doing the splits. Not necessarily out of like heavy physical pain,
right,
but out of the combination of the physical experience he was having and his frustration.
Yeah, and he wasn't like doing it correctly or something. Or
And I remember that was the beginning of me witnessing quite a bit people having the experience of having really emotional reactions to physical endeavors.
Yes.
And I was lucky to have started young enough that I hadn't built up emotions and things in those body parts in the same way that some people may have, because I was constantly sort of like digging into those things.
Yeah, you were already sort of working with the material.
Yeah.
I mean, because martial arts is a somatic practice.
Yeah.
It's an experience. And I wonder, could you talk about that internal, like, I'm hearing that, you know, you were a ninja at Halloween for years. You embraced this part of you. It really made an impact. It was an important part of your life. And I'm wondering, like, what was your internal experience? What did it give you when you were young? That maybe, as you were noticing for other peers, as you're alluding to, like, how do you see that difference within you showing up?
I think I noticed the difference more when I stopped.
When did you stop?
Middle school, like 8th grade, when I like stopped really doing it on like a regular basis.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm hearing like there's feelings underneath this. Yeah, tell me what happened.
Well, we moved. I think when we moved, first of all, I had like a specific place that I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was sort of like a community and a routine and kind of a sense of home in that place that I was used to.
Yeah.
And when we moved, it felt like a mountain to climb to start that over again.
Yeah.
And then my natural social circle, when we moved, had zero interest in it. And I think even, I think it was even my first experience as a kid of being like, oh, being flexible isn't masculine.
Right.
Which was really fascinating.
Yeah.
Like, I remember going to drink water from a water fountain and not having to bend my legs to do it.
Yeah.
And somebody shitting on that. Somebody being like, that's so gay.
Oh, man.
You know, like it being gay that I would
that you
bend
didn't
over
have
to
to
drink
bend
water
your
without
legs.
bending my legs. Like, what the fuck are you
so
doing,
weird.
dude?
It's so
Yeah,
weird.
but as a kid, you have no
no,
context, you don't know better, you don't have identity. It certainly wasn't 2024. You don't have access to information.
Makes
it's
a difference.
All you know is that teeny tiny bubble.
Yeah.
And so I think that had a pretty big impact on me, actually.
Absolutely.
Where I was like, oh, I guess, like,
I can't do this.
I gotta, like, stop being so gay with my flexibility.
I didn't realize that martial arts meant I was gay. That's interesting. Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yes.
So as you weren't able to practice anymore because of maybe this like peer pressure thing that was starting to happen.
Yeah.
Also hitting puberty too.
Yeah, totally.
Which is a part of this recipe, part of the pot.
Yeah.
So, what shifted for you after you had to sort of give this up, at least temporarily?
I mean, to your point, that's a rocky point in anybody's life, so it's hard to attribute what it is versus what,
Chicken or the
yeah,
egg.
Yeah, totally. So I'm not 100% sure what the parallels are, but, it definitely coincided with, I don't know, closing off, starting to shut down a little bit more.
I mean, the fact that, like, the flexibility versus, I wonder, not doing it, become less flexible.
Yeah.
Also, and what does that do in our bodies?
Yeah. And I think for me, it was the beginning of me not following like a physical impulsive life. And so I had spent a long time having a certain capacity to do things in a physical manner that were just expressive of that moment for me.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to continue to do that. You sort of, even now as an adult, if you stretch or you do yoga on a regular basis or you play sports or whatever it is you do,
right.
If you do those things on a regular basis, you have the ability to navigate your existence in a physical manner,
right,
in a more effective capacity. And I lost a big piece of that probably when I stopped, because when you have the advantage of starting something so early, that allows you to have a certain variation to what you can do with your body.
Absolutely.
And the ability to sort of, like, I would imagine it's the same for somebody who starts dance early.
Right.
You're used to feeling a certain way and then addressing it physically. But if that calcifies, and your ability to express yourself physically starts to become more limited, your ability to address it also becomes limited.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And I think I also had markers of ways that it was worth doing, and when I was no longer able to do it in that same capacity, mistakenly I felt like it wasn't worth doing.
Yeah.
So I I was like, oh, I can't do the split anymore. And instead of being like, oh, I'm going to dig into this and revisit it and like learn it again, I took it as a sign that it was like over.
And what was that like, to feel like that part of you was closed? Especially heading into high school, middle school.
It's hard to say because, I mean, I was a latch kid at this point.
Yeah.
And I didn't have guidance, so I was already on my own.
Generally kind of closed in many ways.
100%.
Because you kind of had to be.
100%.
Yeah.
And then didn't have people who were like, hey, remember you had this thing that you loved. Let me sort of encourage you to revisit this.
Yeah.
And so I don't know really what it felt like to lose it because I was just consumed by a million other things.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is it sounds like when you were practicing martial arts, there was just an awareness that was there with your body. Yeah. That you were cultivating. Yeah. Like it was a practice. Yeah. And it is, right? Like these are kind of muscles, and I haven't gotten into interoception too much in this podcast yet, but like the ability to be with the inside and what's happening internally, as well as proprioception, how our bodies are moving, and our other senses, right? Yeah. This internal sense of what's happening for me right now, my heart rate, my temperature, all these things that we spend a lot of time in society
Yeah.
being like, I'm going to ignore that. I might
Yeah.
have to go to the bathroom now, but I kind of have to be in this meeting, or
Yeah.
I'm really hungry right now, but I can't actually take care of that right now. We're
Yeah.
constantly pushing these needs away.
Yeah.
Whereas when you have some kind of a somatic practice or
Yeah.
some kind of practice that's inviting you into checking in with yourself every
That's
day,
right.
right?
Yeah, that's right.
And then losing that, since it is a muscle that you kind of have to cultivate this awareness, it makes
Yeah.
sense that you would start to lose some touch with those things
Yeah.
as you're not leaning. Like, was there any other physical activity? I'm thinking
Playing
about sports.
basketball
Yeah.
and- I was playing
The
sports.
masculine things
Yeah,
to do
yeah,
that were
exactly.
acceptable.
Yeah, that's
so,
right.
So how did that go, and what was your relationship to that? And was there any sort of, I don't know, if you were playing basketball and there are some things that are like conventionally okay to do in basketball.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there were any things that you noticed you're like, oh, but this is what we do in like this is similar to martial arts, but it's like okay in this context and not okay in that context.
I think that unfortunately I also had arrived at a point where like my actions and the way I related to my body were very informed by my fears of other people's thoughts about it.
Totally.
And so I think I carried more of that same theme into sports.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did that show up in sports for you?
Just put me in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably a good way also to describe like the transition from doing martial arts on a regular basis to not.
Yes.
I became more heady.
Yes.
I definitely remember sort of like floating around in a different capacity before.
Yeah.
And then when I lost a consistent physical practice, starting to think about things a lot.
Right. You know, they say overthinking is underfeeling. I want
Yeah.
that like tattooed on my forehead.
Yeah.
You know, that's so interesting.
Yeah, and you know, it takes a lot of. You're lucky if you ever arrive at a conclusion where you're like, the answer's not in my head.
It's not.
No.
It's not. It's in our bodies.
Yeah.
The difference between sports and like martial arts, because they both are somatic.
Yeah.
Right. Because one's dealing with, and also it's like a game. It can be very social engagement forward. It's you're playing with other people. It can be very like positive and bonding.
Yeah.
And with martial arts, I feel like there's a bit more of I could be projecting this because I'm not a big and played football or anything like that, but there's a sort of mindfulness that's a part of it. Like it's there's an exploration of your relationship not only with the person you're maybe sparring with but also with yourself. And your responsibility.
There's way more moments for yourself.
Yeah.
For
and
sure.
like reflection.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about like, is that sort of one of the big differences that you see between, martial arts, which I traditionally would think is like very masculine, but it's actually quite balanced. It's very yin and yang, right?
Totally. Yeah.
And that's, I think, why it allows you to have some more awareness to it, because you're not cutting off the like divine feminine part, which is the ability to flow and creative energy. Like just talking about masculine and feminine as far as energetically goes, right? Energetically speaking.
Yeah.
What was your awareness? You said you sort of felt like you were floating beforehand.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what the quality was as you were playing basketball and not doing martial arts. How did you shift in your body? And how did that affect your relationships and like going to high school and middle school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that physically I had a certain ability, but mentally and emotionally I had pretty heavy blockages.
Yeah.
And so I think that if it was recreationally, I had a certain level of like float.
Yeah. It was for fun.
If it was for fun. But once it got to there being like tryouts and stakes and even sort of social consequences that come with this idea of like making a team. And how that has consequences for your ability to be a part of a community. Yeah. Especially if your parents aren't around.
Right.
So I think in retrospect, I look back and it's like, oh man, there was actually sort of a lot at stake for me.
Looking for attachment.
100%.
Yeah.
Looking to like be tethered to something.
Yeah.
So, but again, those moments were headier moments for me.
Mm-hmm.
But the moments in time that were for fun, yeah, they were bonding experiences.
Yeah.
For sure. And they were like moments to, yeah, float a little bit, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of like be present,
Yeah.
be around physically.
Yeah.
Not, to be out of your head.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's always been the biggest value of something physical for me. It's just been this idea of like, oh, I can just hone in on this very thing.
Yeah.
And just be with this thing.
Yeah.
Just put all my focus on this. The same way you would with meditation or anything else.
Exactly. It's presence.
Yeah.
What's happening right now in this moment right now.
Yeah.
And can I just be with this moment right now?
Yeah.
Without thinking about what just happened, what's about to happen.
Yeah, and it's essential in sports, actually.
Yes, it is.
For like excelling.
And in acting.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
It's all coming together, everybody. Here we go.
Yeah.
So, high school's happening.
Yeah.
You're playing sports.
Yeah.
Is there any part of you at that moment that was aware that maybe something was missing for you?
Yeah.
Yeah?
You know, I was sort of an untethered soul floating in an abyss.
Saying floating a lot.
Yeah.
Floating is this quality that is coming up.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned it also as it has like a positive connotation to it.
For sure.
There's something easeful about
floating.
Floating.
Look, I think there's something also that not everything is bad about being untethered.
Totally. Yeah.
And
you can flow.
Yeah.
You're free. You're more flexible.
Yeah.
And there's more
and it's
ease.
got its downsides, but it's also got its pluses.
Right.
You're not the product of a manufacturing line.
Yeah.
And there's something really beneficial about that and beautiful about it. But the issue is, it's like you're kind of out there and left to the elements.
Right.
And that can grow a good or a bad fungus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can be like the fungus that snaps you and other people out of the matrix.
Right.
Because you haven't been in it in the same way everybody else has been.
Right.
But it can also be the fungus that rots you.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to cultivate.
Right.
Or if you're not just lucky enough to like be sitting in the right pile of shit and being morphed into something valuable. Yeah, with the right elements.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to think about like the implications of how our environment shapes the ideas around these things, right? Like these ideas aren't things we're born with. They're things that we observe, that we believe maybe because we're sort of in this society contract in a way, unspoken society contract many times.
Yeah.
And and there are these parts of us that want us to stay in line with those parts because we don't want to be kicked out of the tribe.
Yeah.
Right? Basic survival. We actually need attachment and need connection to survive. It's very hard for a single man to be out and just surviving in the woods by himself forever.
Yeah.
We need each other.
And also like highly unenjoyable.
And so unenjoyable. I mean, sometimes it's great to go into the woods by yourself, but it's not forever.
Yeah. So I was supposed to play sports in college, but I just didn't show up.
Okay, tell me more about that. Wait, what?
All right. So even in high school, like I used to go to football practice or to I played volleyball and ran track and field and stuff. And I used to show up to practice in Timberland. And they'd be like, what are you doing?
You're so New York. I can't.
Honestly,
it's so New York.
It's not even New York. It's just total mess. No idea what the fuck I'm doing. I have no.
You don't run in Tim's?
I don't know what the hell I was thinking. I'm from New York, not from the city. I'm from Long Beach.
Long Beach.
Yeah, from Long Beach.
Which is Long Island, right?
It's an island off of Long Island.
Is it Long Island or not?
No. It's a small beach town. Okay?
All right,
it's a different vibe.
It's a different vibe than Long Island. It's a beach. Okay.
You don't like the rest of Long Island coming to our island.
Clear.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So, my mom was in Long Beach at the time, and not doing great, and so I kind of felt like I wanted to have proximity.
Yeah.
And I got offered a bunch of money from NYU, so
hell yeah. I
went to NYU, and so I basically went to administration at NYU, and I was like, look, I can't afford it, and I need housing.
Yeah.
So I was like, I either need housing or I got to get out of here. And they were like, all right, we'll give you housing. They put me in a dorm room, and the guy that they put me in a dorm room with was having like a similar experience. And he's from Bergen County, New Jersey. Okay. So they paired us together. Yeah. And that dude was an actor.
Oh my gosh, is this how it began?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So his name's Gio Perez. He's still a really good buddy of mine. And he was like, hey, I'm doing a play. You want to come see this play? Yeah. And I was like, sure. And he was playing Dionysus in the Bacchae.
Oh my God!
Yeah. And I went and I saw him, and he's this little 5'4", wide-eyed Puerto Rican kid. And he just blew my socks off. Wow. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And then I sort of ended up naturally just socializing with him and his circle. Yeah. A lot. Yeah. And then I was just constantly around artists. Mm-hmm. And
what was that
asking
like?
questions. It felt like I wasn't so gay anymore.
You are!
I was like, I'm not gay! I was like, I should have kept stretching. What the fuck, dude?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's how they get you.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So it felt like home. You know, It was cool. It was like, I sort of found like an understanding of the world. You know? Yeah. And so I was just constantly picking their brains. Mm-hmm. And they were like, finally, like the summer after college, a bunch of them were like, why don't you just go try to do like an intensive or something? Yeah. So I went and I did an intensive at Atlantic Conservatory. I did like a 6-week program there. Yes. And got very lucky because I got put together with a group of people who were amazing and really talented and way more experienced than me and really nurturing and generous and supportive. And I had no idea what I was doing. Sure. And I was horrendous, terrible. They're like, dude, stop indicating. I was like, what's indicating?
That?
Yeah, I was the worst.
I'm supposed to be sad. Yeah.
Oh, and I'm still really good friends with a bunch of people from this program.
That's how it all began.
And probably like a month in, I was like, oh, this is what I want.
Yeah. Well, what was that? Like, how did you know? What?
I think once I recognized there was a recurring theme for me with acting that really solidified it really early on, which was that it kind of made value out of things that I had avoided.
Ooh.
And so it sort of like gave me a reason to sort of like run towards the darkness and figure it out.
Yes, shadow work.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like, sure, it was cathartic or whatever, or therapeutic or helpful for me to sort of deal with demons. Yeah. But I also recognized that it was valuable for other people in doing it. Yeah. And I think once I realized, the more vulnerable I am in this, the better the work is, the better it is for the people who are experiencing and consuming the work. Yeah. And I was like, what better thing to do than to take the stuff that I've run away from and then turn it into value for other people.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
How old are you when you were putting that together?
23.
That's young. That's very wise for that age, I feel like. I feel like for me, I mean, I did start Juilliard at 23, so I guess I did know that there were like parts of my shadow and parts of me that were blocking me in the work. Yeah. But I don't know if I had as much awareness that...
But you had acting experience before that.
I did. Yeah. And I think that for me almost like was a hindrance because I sort of had this expectation. It's like, this is what I do. Yeah. I am emotionally available. Yeah. And also like there were these, like I remember this one scene. I was at AMDA first before Juilliard, like right after high school. And there was one class where we were doing like dinner with friends. Yeah. And this scene, I think I was Beth, and you're like talking, and out of nowhere, you're just supposed to burst into tears, right? And I just could not do it. Yeah. And I was terrified of it. Yeah. And I was freaking out. I remember like my body in that class was just, everything was like tight. And I was just like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this thing? And my teacher was like, are you breathing? like, just take a breath. And as
Yeah.
soon as I like inhaled,
Yeah.
I was like, gah! Like,
Yeah.
everything comes out.
Yeah.
But there were, to that point, like, there were many things like that.
Yeah.
That I was running up against. And I just didn't know why they were there, how to get rid of them, but that I wanted to. And I wasn't like connecting the psychology of it all yet to acting, because there is obviously a ton of overlap, because
you weren't seeing it as like a means to figuring that shit out for yourself.
No, not yet. I was like,
it was just an acting obstacle for you.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes, because like I could cry in my life. I felt like I was emotionally just generally available.
Yeah.
But there were some moments on stage, which is one of the first places I think I really felt safe to be as emotional and as big as I wanted to. That's why I like found solace in it growing up.
Yeah.
But there was this whole other element where I was not aware that my own hang-ups, my own healing that needed to happen, my own blockages were these like, metastasized bits of traumatic experiences that got stuck in my body.
Yeah.
And because there's not a ton of, or at least at the time that I was training, there wasn't a ton of trauma-informed approaches to acting. It was pretty not trauma-informed.
Yeah.
And so, it took me a really long time to connect those dots, I would say, until I started studying psychology. Because I've always wanted to know, like,
interesting.
Why do people do what they do?
Yeah.
What makes people tick? I still wasn't fully
connecting the two.
For myself.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It was my own resistance to probably seeing what I wasn't ready to see yet.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly fell back into that trap later.
Yeah.
Once it became like a job.
Right.
And I sort of forgot entirely why I liked it, or like what the value of it was. Or, I mean, I remember going in early on for Alexa Fogel.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was like one of my first big auditions. And it was really fucking challenging.
Yeah.
It was like a Civil War series, and the guy had one leg and was an alcoholic.
Oh, boy.
And it was like a ton of dialogue.
Stretch.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
And so I went in very nervous.
Yeah.
And I got like 5 words in. And she was like, okay. She was like, sit up. Use your voice. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, sure.
I did it again. She was like, okay, thanks. And I wrote down. And I went to my agents and I was like, she hates me. It didn't go well. And of course, like she hollered and she was like, oh, he was great. I'm going to bring him back.
Yeah, of course. We always think it's way worse than it is.
I go back for this callback with the creators and I do it the first time. It does not go well. I'm very nervous. And the guy, Barry Levinson, was like, you want to do it again? And I was like, yeah, I would love to. And I looked at Alexa, who was reading with me, and I was like, anything? What do you got? And she was like, breathe.
Stop! God bless her!
And I couldn't. And the truth was, like, I couldn't.
Right.
I just couldn't.
Right.
I couldn't fucking breathe, dude.
Well, when was this? It was early on, yeah?
Super early.
Yeah.
It was like,
I've had these moments.
Very early.
And I still think about these moments today.
Yeah, I believe
This is what they mean by, like, look, part of this business is it's preparation meets luck, right? And being like, when that opportunity's there, doing the best that you can, and knowing that it's all in service of something else.
You have to look at that kind of an experience and go like, Jesus, how do I address this?
Yeah. But there's also no way to figure that out without just doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after college is when you started like going and doing the acting thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when did you pick martial arts back up?
I did, but it's not. But then something bad happened. I started doing jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
And I was in a training session in a dojo in New York. And basically, when you get thrown in jiu-jitsu exercises, you're not resisting, you're letting the person throw you.
Right.
And so you have to know how to fall.
Right.
Right? Because you're not resisting it, and you're allowing them to practice their technique.
Right.
So I got whipped around head first into somebody's back because the dojo was too crowded. So instead of hitting the mat, I went head first into somebody's back and I broke my neck. Yeah.
You broke your neck?
Yeah.
When did this happen? How old were you?
24, 25.
This is when you were doing acting stuff.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Well, what happened?
So, I was like a little dizzy, seeing stars a little bit, and I bit my tongue.
Oh, no.
And I was like, I'm going to sit down for a second. I sat down. I was about to get back in, and they were like, why don't you just like chill, go home.
Yeah.
I went home, and I went to sleep, and I was laying on my back, and I woke up, and I went to lift my head forward from my back, and I remember it hurting the back of my neck.
Yeah.
So it's almost like if you were to curl your arm, but the back of your arm hurt.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, that's not even supposed to be activated. Yeah. What's going on here? So it's like, oh, that's fucking weird.
Yeah.
And it was I think it was a Saturday. It was a Saturday or a Sunday. And there weren't like urgent cares then. And so the only doctor's office that was open that had an appointment was a chiropractor. So I went to the chiropractor, and he was like, what's going on? What happened? And I told him. And he's like, okay. And he's like feeling around and stuff. And he was like, you know what? He's like, just to be safe, he's like, I have an x-ray machine.
Oh, thank God. It's like, let him take an x-ray.
A lot of chiropractors don't do x-rays.
No, they don't. I wasn't expecting that.
So
thank
he
God.
was like, let me do an x-ray just in case. And so he went and he did an x-ray, and he came back, and he was like, I think you should go to the hospital. He's like, I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm not going to touch you.
Yeah.
He's like, I think you should go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and they did their own scans and stuff, and they came back, and I forget if it's a CAT scan or an MRI when you go like
into
a tunnel.
I think that's MRI.
Whatever the tube thing is. I went into a tube, right?
Yeah.
And then I came out. I went in the tube, there was one person. I
Uh-huh.
came out of the tube, and there were like 6 people.
Oh my God.
And they were like, don't move. Don't move. And like multiple people. And then they put me in like a thing, and the doctor came out, and he was like, yeah, you fractured your vertebrae.
How many did you fracture?
Just one. And he was like, he was basically like, all right, you can't put your arms above your head, all these things. I had to shave my head because I couldn't wash my hair. Yeah, so I buzzed my head. So, but what happened was I ended up not losing a bunch of sleep because the brace was like mushing my jaw together in my sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think a couple weeks in, I was like, fuck this thing. And I started taking it off when I'd go to bed, and I'd surround myself with pillows.
Okay.
And then I would wake up like this, and I'd be like,
Are we good?
Did I turn my neck? Like every night.
Oh my God.
So I just couldn't sleep.
How long did this go on for?
So I had a checkup 3 weeks in to see how and I went in with the neck brace on, and the doctor took it off and was feeling around. He was like, you took the neck brace off, didn't you? And I was like, I couldn't sleep. And he was like, okay. They ran some tests, and he came back. He was like, all right, you're all good. He's like, good to be young. He's like, get out of here,
done?
stupid. Yeah.
3 weeks?
3 weeks.
Also, you were walking around with a broken neck before you even got there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Strong genes.
Yeah.
Something.
So yeah.
You broke your neck.
Broke my neck.
Never went back to martial arts class.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And acting's happening.
Yeah.
And, well, okay, so there was a reason you wanted to go back to martial arts class.
For sure.
What was happening for you there? And then, since you broke your neck, you could go back. What did you end up doing instead?
Yeah, so I think I was like, I think this business was just getting me in my head again.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, I need to do something.
Get me into my body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and also something that, I was craving something that would give me like some power.
Yes.
I was just feeling like stripped of fucking power and onus.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted something to like invigorate me and make me feel like I had some control and some fucking oomph.
Yeah.
And so when I broke my neck and then recovered, I think after that I just became really heavily focused on just feeling good.
Yes.
I was like, I just want to feel good.
Yeah.
And so I started doing yoga.
Okay.
And I moved out to Cali. I was out in California, which is like a very yoga friendly.
Oh, is it?
area.
It tends to be. Yeah. West Coast, Best Coast.
I got yoga in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
I found a really great studio, and I remember having a certain idea of what I could do with my body, and then getting reality checks really early on and being like, oh, I can barely sit up straight. Like, I can barely just keep my spine straight in a cross-legged position.
Right.
And I remember a yoga teacher being like, yeah, man, you got like, you're pretty tight, actually. And I was like, oh, that's fucking weird. When did that happen?
Right.
Like, when did this happen? How did this happen? And so I just kept going back. And I think once I started feeling better, but also seeing progress.
Yeah. And your flexibility and and what other ways did you notice?
I just felt better mentally. I also felt like I had sort of found a like-minded community, I guess. Even if it wasn't social.
Right.
It's not like I was like kicking it with a bunch of people from the yoga class afterwards. But to be in a space with those people on a regular basis with the same intention was really valuable.
It's so powerful to be in like a class with that collective energy.
Yeah.
Like, I love a self-practice.
Same.
I do it.
Yeah.
But there is something really different and really special about a class where, even like packed class. Yeah. That can feel like uncomfortable sometimes even. Yeah. But man, when you're all flowing together.
Yeah, it's the best.
It's the best.
Yeah, the whole room fucking up.
What do you think that is? What are we responding to in those moments?
I mean, I personally think that we're like all one giant organism.
I agree.
That's what I think.
Have you done shrooms? Because I have.
I've done so many mushrooms.
Me too. And that's the lesson.
Yeah, so I think it's that.
Yeah.
It's sort of like cells moving at the same time in the same
syncing
manner.
up together.
Totally. Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, people can have this experience in
concerts,
non-traditional means of spirituality. You can have this experience in sports.
Yep.
Honestly, like if you get in a flow on in a team sport, and you start doing things where like you're not thinking about it at all, and you haven't practiced that thing, and it just happened, and you both are so symbiotic that you're just in this flow. It's like it happens.
It's pretty magical.
Yeah.
It really is. Like,
it's amazing.
Magical.
Yeah. I think we're just all part of the same thing. Yeah. And you're just sort of syncing up.
And is yoga like one of your main practices that you still do?
I return to it always because it's just the thing that makes me feel the best. Yeah. And so I think that's my North Star for all of it at this point. And I have had multiple moments for different roles where I've had to do physical transformations that require a totally different kind of physical behavior. Yeah. And I know what that feels like. Yeah. Like, I know what it feels like to do a bunch of like cardio and be shredded and be like, oh, I look sick, but to not feel the same.
I'm hungry all the time.
Yeah, and to just feel a certain level of stiffness or rigidity, or just not to feel sort of physically opened or whatever that is. And so none of like weights or any of that stuff, it just doesn't. Not that there's not value to that stuff. I think there's a lot of value to it, but I physically feel 8 billion times better from doing yoga on a regular basis. Yeah. And I also think that the psychological impact of it is leaps and bounds more than it is to go crazy in the gym. Yeah. I think going to a gym is very valuable and it's worth doing. Right. But I think even like the breathing exercises that you go through in a yoga practice alone, like if you fuck around with like Kundalini at all.
Oh yes, I do.
You could do things that are briefly challenging physically in a Kundalini practice and spend an immense amount of that time doing insane breathing stuff only. Yeah. And have your perspective completely shifted.
Totally. Breathwork.
In a way that you can't get from squatting.
Right. There's something about the intention and the energy behind the choice. Like if I'm going to the gym to get swole, to get shredded, to control, extract, create, an
aesthetic.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not like any of these things are negative in and of themselves. If I'm not going to connect to myself and I'm going to control myself or control a certain outcome. I think that is the difference. Because
that's a great point. Because in yoga, you can be expressive. You can sort of like express whatever sort of like physical impulse you have in that pose.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's an invitation in most classes I've gone to do that, to have that freedom.
But it's never, but the sentiment is never like push through the pain.
No, it's never. It's always cause no harm. I mean,
whereas that's really like almost an essential part of the sentiment sometimes if you're trying to get like humongous.
Push through.
Yeah.
And this is the thing we talk about a lot in yoga too, is the capacity to be with what is uncomfortable. And I think, like, as I sort of compare it to powerlifting, say, there is a difference between understanding interoception, like my body is capable of doing this thing, even though I'm sore, my muscles, maybe I'm shaking right now, maybe it's really burning. Yeah. But I know the difference because of yoga, because I've established a connection to my body and know the difference between like, this is really intense and I can stay here and still do it. Or this is going to damage me, right? Yeah. Sharpshooting pain versus, you know, aching, burning sensation. Yeah. And I think, you know, and I feel like across the board with anything that's a physically intense practice is if you're pushing yourself into an injury, then just by doing that, there is a disconnection because your body is probably telling you or giving you some signals, whether you're aware of them or not, that you are getting closer and closer to that edge.
There's no intention generally in going to a gym and look, you are trying to feel better and you are trying to, a lot of people are trying to clear their head, but generally you're not going to the gym to heal. Right. And I think that's also like it's a big part of a lot of people's yoga practice. Yeah. Is I'm going through a healing process. Yes. And so I think several people have had the experience of doing yoga where, I don't know, maybe tears come out. Oh, absolutely, all the time. You know? Yeah. And that could even be, you can even have that experience very surprisingly from like a yin practice or from a restorative practice. Yes. Where you're not doing anything grueling and you're actually just going through a process of releasing and letting go. Yeah. And you start to recognize, like, you might not even be crying. Right. You might literally just be leaking tears. Yeah. And in general, you're not going to have that kind of experience in a gym. Right. It's what we alluded to earlier. If I want to get out of my head, I got to get into my body. Yeah. And whether people are consciously aware of that happening is one thing, but it happens. Yeah. And I think even when you're in your body doing like sports at the gym, I think what keeps us from it being maybe a deeper healing experience is the inability to be vulnerable in those places. Like if we had the culture around going to the gym and it could be healing, we're here to get better. We're here to feel better. Yeah. We're here to get stronger. Yeah. And I just think it's a cultural paradigm shift. Yeah. That is possible. I don't know if it's going to happen. Yeah. But I think there are pockets maybe where this is possible. I certainly have had times where I've had to put on a bunch of mass for something, and in those periods of time in the gym where I'm really pushing myself, where I'm like, this is definitely unleashing quite a bit of anger. Yes. Can we talk about this? So that, I would love to hear, because I'm assuming you're talking, I mean, you've done this a couple times. I've done this a few times now. Well, so I've had to go to like both ends of the extreme in the, on the last season of this show, The Deuce. I had to lose a bunch of weight. And that was a lot more challenging, I think. How long did you have? Maybe 2 months. Okay. I don't know. I don't remember exactly. We were in Indonesia. Oh my God. And I didn't know when like production was picking back up or if it was picking back up and what my involvement was. And then they hit me up and they were like, hey, you get AIDS this year. I was like, oh, okay. Do I like get it throughout the season or do I like start off that way? And they were like, you've had it. Wow. It's like, oh, okay. Okay, cool. And were they the ones that were like, we need you to lose weight? They'll never say that. Yeah. They're never going to say that. So like, I think I was just like, so do I need to lose a bunch of weight for this? And they were like, it should aesthetically make sense. Like, oh, there you go. Cool. Got it. We're not saying yes. Yeah. We're not saying no. Dude, and the first day that I got there, they had some of the people there had the nerve to be like, but you look kind of like shredded. I lost a ton of weight, but part of how I had to do that in such a quick manner was I was swimming a lot.
Yeah.
Not
Cardio.
fast.
Yeah.
But still, like, there's something that happens to your arms, especially when all your fat disappears.
Yeah.
That, like, if you take your shirt off, you're going to have some definition.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I sort of instantly started, we were fortunately staying at a house that had a treadmill.
Oh, wow.
So I just started running, like, 9 miles a day, and then swimming.
Shit.
So every day I'd, like, I cut down my intake of food a ton, and then I started running 9 miles a day, and then swimming for, like, a couple hours. Yeah.
How'd that go?
It was okay at first. I think that I learned a lot from that process, even about like what not to do, which is, I think, again, because we're in sort of a more of like an information era now, people feel like you can sort of get access to context that you need for experiences that you're about to have in a way that is like actually pretty fucking new.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
And so you even hear this, I've heard this from people like Christian Bale, where it's like he just, overdid it a couple times and would do it differently the next time. And I sort of did the same.
Right.
And then when I got back to New York, a bunch of people were sort of like, who hadn't seen me in a while, were kind of like, dude, what's going on? Are you okay?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm good. Why? What's up? And they were like, it's like, all right, I'll go see a doctor, right? So I told production, I was like, you guys need to get me like a nutritionist and a doctor and stuff. And they were like, yeah, of course.
Great.
So I went and I saw this guy, and he was like, all right, we're going to do like some in-depth blood tests.
Oh, man.
And then he brought me back in a week later, and he was like, man, you're like not, dude, he's like, you're on a bad path here. Like, your thyroid's all fucked up. Yeah, he's like, you're a mess.
This stuff really can affect you for the rest of your fucking life.
Yeah. So he was like, we gotta figure this out.
By yourself before you started? Like, did you have a trainer?
Yeah, because I was in fucking Southeast Asia. It's like, what am I gonna do? I had conversations with trainers, but
you were kind of on your own to do.
Yeah, to a degree. You know, a couple people were like, here's sort of like how many calories you could try to have a day.
Was production ever like, did they help you find somebody to help you at that time, or did that came later on?
They helped me find somebody to a degree, but to be totally honest, it was people are never going to protect you the way that you're going to protect you.
100%.
They're just never going to.
Really important to know that.
They're just nobody's going to ever advocate for you the way that you can advocate for yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so they set me up with some doctor appointments, but they kind of felt like they just found some random people, which again, it's like, look, they're in the thick of a production with 8 billion things going on.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's not like their intention was,
no.
Hey, just go to this fucking doctor.
Yeah.
They're just not thinking about the nuances of what it is to find a capable, special doctor.
I mean, I would hope that there'd be like connections within the industry of places that you knew.
Not a lot of people have done this, honestly. I mean,
Christian
that's
Bale's
the thing.
people, I guess you could go to their people.
That's the thing that you learn also.
Yeah.
Like, the more that I've had to do sort of physical transformations, the more you realize there's not a lot of points of reference.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people to even speak to be like, hey, how was this for you? It's
yes.
hard to find those people.
Yeah.
And the first doctor that I went and I saw, she basically was using the opportunity. She was using it as an opportunity to sort of like sell me stuff. So she had like nutritional packages, essentially, that had like bars and like prepped meals and all these things. But I'm sure she was essentially getting a cut of whatever.
Just like pyramid scheme or something, maybe.
Totally, 100%, right?
Oh,
and of course, like when I looked in the ingredients in these things, they were filled with sugars and all kinds of shit. And I was like, what the fuck? So I got introduced to a doctor from somebody that I trusted personally.
Right.
And I went and I saw this guy, and we ran all these tests, and he was like, yeah, look, this is what we're going to have to do. Here's like the healthy way to do this. And so I followed suit, Did
it get better?
It got better. Yeah, it was fine. Yeah. I also found out in this process, though, so the blood work came back, and he was like, all right, so here's what's going on, here's what's bad, all that stuff's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
But, don't keep doing this because you're going to die, so that's not good. So let's keep you here and
Keep
doing
you
this the right
alive.
way. You've gone way too hard on this thing in the wrong way. So here's what I'm going to do. Here's what we can do to sort of like address the rest of the prep of this role. He was like, also, you have Lyme's disease.
Oh, shit.
I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, so he's like, so I can get you on antibiotics for that if you want to like try to get rid of that also.
Oh my God.
So I ended up, and the thing about antibiotics for Lyme's disease, sometimes I forget what it's called, but it has this effect essentially where sometimes it can in it fixing you, it activates symptoms.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
There's a term for this
Yeah,
where like
yeah.
medication will
Bring out
elicit the symptoms
Yes.
in the process of trying to get rid of them.
Yes. Yes. I've heard
Almost like a vaccine.
Right.
So in the middle of shooting the deuce, I was like having like major Lyme's disease symptoms.
Oh my gosh.
One of which was like can happen is like heavy paranoia.
Oh no.
Yeah. But I knew it, so the good news was I knew it. I went for like a walk. We were living in Chelsea at the time, and I went for a walk, and I kept on feeling like I had to cross the street away from people, and I was like, all right, I know what's going on. All right, I'm gonna just go back inside.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Like even now, if I say we went and got like a bunch of ice cream, I'd be like 80 years old tomorrow. Oh yeah, I'd be like stiff as a board.
Is it inflammation?
It's inflammation, but I'm less interested in like what the causal part of it is, and more interested in like the somatic experience of it. And the experience of it is that like you could do yoga all day, every day, and you would like every morning you would wake up as inflexible and stiff as when you began. Wow. And so it's like, if you're not, and you know, everybody unfortunately has very different experiences of it. Yeah. And so I don't want to diminish people's experiences of it. For me, I've been lucky enough that it's just dietary for me. Okay. So if I eat fine, I'm good. Okay. Right? Yeah. So that's it. Like if I eat fine, I'm okay. If I don't eat fine, I'd have to like wake up and stretch for like 2 hours to feel right. Sometimes I even wonder about the relationship between this is weird, but like autoimmune diseases and trauma.
You know, that's not weird at all. This is what I study.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
This is literally what I do. Have you read The Body Keeps the Score? Are you familiar with it? Yeah. I studied for a year with Dr. Gabor Mate, who's like
cool. Yeah, I know who he is. Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, I know.
Have you read When the Body Says No?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
he's amazing. It's interesting to me too. Since you're familiar with this work, I feel like I could say this.
Yeah.
We talked about this somatic experience of flexibility versus inflexibility. Yeah. Rigidity versus flow.
Right.
You see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
And that thing that happens, right, when we get to that age or a period in our life where we learn, oh, this thing that comes naturally to me that I'm good at is like not okay, and then we swing in this opposite direction. And then, but this is like, it's an intellect, we're talking about it intellectually, but it's actually your body's experience of that is its own experience.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that the way it's shown up in an autoimmune fashion is in this way that has made you feel on some days when you're not eating right or eating well or whatever. Yeah. Your body does that thing where it's suddenly inflexible again. Yeah. I just want to, I don't have anything else to say about that,
but even like the side straddle stuff, it's like that's the thing I was most focused on and most proud of when I was doing martial arts.
You can do that freely when
I take psychedelics. Yeah.
What the fuck?
And can't do it at all remotely in any capacity otherwise.
Right.
Yeah. Look, I
all of this stuff is one thing.
100%.
It's one thing.
And it's not theoretical. It's very weird. It's very weird to sort of know this in an age where there's a novelty to it where it's not considered fact by a lot of people.
I know,
it's
but
weird
it actually
to be at that place.
I know, but the science is there now. It's just that it's not.
Oh no, I know.
It hasn't. I know you've read the books.
Yeah, it's just not. It's just not common knowledge.
But it's starting to be.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm getting very excited about that.
Awesome. Yeah.
Because And it's like, I'm sure scary for some parts of like the medical industry, because a lot of this is like, oh, we can do some of this holistic care. A lot of it's free.
Yeah.
It's like nutrition.
Yeah.
And basic, like, cry when you want to cry.
Yeah.
And let your children cry.
Yeah.
Let your children have their tantrums, support them through the tantrums.
Yeah.
But like when we stop the emotion before it's done,
then
it's not done, and it gets stuck, and then it causes all these ailments and dis-ease in the body.
Yeah, dude.
So the Deuce.
Yeah.
What are the other projects? Iron Claw, I know.
I think what's happened is there was a period in time where I was like, I don't want to do fucking CW. I don't want to do this like fucking network garbage.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. I want to be a transformational actor.
Yeah.
And then I've gone through that process a few times, and it's actually been grueling and pretty fucking challenging.
Very.
And now what's happened is directors will hit me up when there's a part that they can't typecast. Where it's like, somebody's going to have to morph into this because there's not a lot of people walking around as this. And so somebody will hit me up and they'll be like, hey dude, we love you for this. And I'm like, okay, cool. Who's like the reference? And they'll be like, we want like a baritone voice, and we want him to be like a strong rope.
Wow.
And we want to like gray your hair and grow a beard. So it's like now I'm having this
character acting,
which sounds very romantic, but actually
it's so hard.
I've found that like in doing that quite a few times now, that the thing I'm yearning for is artistically is simplicity.
Yeah.
And that's actually what I want, unless somebody were to approach me with a role that's like this, that had a process that aligned with what was required of the role. Because generally, I'm not fucking Jake Gyllenhaal, so nobody's hitting me up a year ahead of time.
Right.
And going, can you morph into this?
Right.
So people are usually like, hey, you have 6 to 8 weeks to be a completely different fucking person. Can you do this? And you're
like, yeah.
I'm like, yeah,
I've done it.
So. Yeah, I
can.
Have
done it.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah,
but I think at this point, unless there's a lot of time for it, I'm way more interested in like stripping players.
Yeah.
That's way more interesting to me now artistically.
I'm curious because I do want to talk a little bit about the Iron Claw
for sure
experience.
Yeah.
And through this lens, because when I saw that movie, it was just so it affected me a lot.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, all right, come with me on this journey we're about to go on. Patriarchy. Here we go.
All right.
I fully believe that like patriarchy as it stands hurts everyone.
Yeah.
Right? It makes it so that culturally, if there's a young boy who happens to be flexible and doesn't need to bend his knees when he's drinking from a water fountain, someone's going to be like, you're gay, and like, and maybe less of that nowadays because Gen Z, Gen A, they seem, they're more woke.
Yeah.
But that's still there. Like, I think we're seeing
whatever version of it is. It's a different manifestation.
And there's a huge wave, I feel like, happening right now. And maybe some people are calling this backlash, but there's a lot of men out there that are seeing society and the paradigm shifting. And our definitions of masculinity are sort of varied right now.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about, as you went through this experience for this film that's really exploring these themes. So I would love to hear about your journey through the transformation and like this very hyper masculinized version of yourself, this character.
Yeah. I have this experience a ton when I get sent auditions and they're looking for Josh Brolin. Right?
Right. Very specific kind of type masculinity.
A man.
Yes.
A man.
Yeah.
Right? And I certainly think it's a pretty big problem still in storytelling, for sure. Mm-hmm. This idea of what men are supposed to be, sound like, and look like, and the Iron Claw. The Iron Claw is interesting because I felt like my job, in a lot of ways, was to be a bit of a counterpoint to the energy of this family.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And And yet I didn't feel that way at all. I actually felt pretty bad. But it was interesting to go through the process of not feeling good, but having to put on the artifice of feeling all right.
Right.
Because in reality, that's what these wrestlers are actually dealing with.
Right.
And so I wasn't having this experience on purpose.
Right.
I wasn't like manipulating myself to have this experience. But in reality, I had gone through this physical transformation, but I was very insecure about it.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to be a certain level of arrogant.
Right. Right.
But I wasn't feeling that way.
Right.
You know? And I was supposed to be enjoying it, or at least seeming like I was enjoying it to a certain degree. And at points I wasn't.
Yeah.
But that also makes sense.
Right.
You know, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work in a very quick period of time.
Yeah.
It was, working out all the time and eating all the time.
Was it 2 months again, or 6 weeks?
2 months,
2 months?
Something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. A lot of eating.
Is there like a
gym
recovery process afterwards?
Yeah.
How do you come down? Yeah, how do you come down?
I think what's happened historically is that I've left behind my own life and gone into this new one.
Right.
And so when it's over, it's like my yoga practice is no longer there.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I've done mistakenly in the past that I didn't do with this film this year, the film that I just worked on was the first time that I was like, oh, I'm having a physical experience for this character, and I'm actually going to just like allow that to happen. I'm going to trust it. And I'm not going to feel like, I'm going to trust that this is doing a lot of the work for me.
Yeah.
And it's like to circle back to this thing of like not knowing what indicating was when I first started. There's a degree of that, even as you get deep into your career and you're a fucking pro, you're still gonna, on your worst days, you're gonna indicate something. Now, you might be able to fool people.
Right. You can manipulate and manufacture
100%. I might be able to do it in a way where nobody knows that I'm indicating.
But
I know.
Totally.
And so there's something about like when you go through like an intense physical transformation, at least now that I've done it for a few times, it's like now I'm like, oh, I can just sort of trust that this is doing some of the storytelling for me. So I've been through this process enough times now too that when I started for Iron Claw, I immediately like told a few friends and my wife, I was like, I'm not going to be the judge of how this is going.
That's great.
Because if you go through, I've learned that if you go through intense physical changes pretty quickly, that you lose track of reality.
Yep.
And there's just inevitable body dysmorphia that happens.
Yep.
And so you can't be the gauge of where you're at physically. It's dangerous.
Totally.
And so you have to just go to people you trust and go like, I'm not going to see myself when I look in the mirror. I trust you. So like every once in a while, I'm going to be like, hey, how's it going?
Yes.
How am I looking?
Yeah.
Or you have a trainer or a nutritionist.
Right.
But those people are also sort of incentivized to tell you you're progressing because you're paying them to help you do so.
That's true.
So it's like having personal relationships where you trust those people to tell you like, and I learned that when I was doing the deuce and I felt like I wasn't skinny enough and I took my shirt off one day and my wife started crying. I was like, oh, okay, I don't see this. It's also fun. It's kind of fun to get all big and jacked.
Yeah. Cool, that's
to know that it's temporary. And also, it's just fun to have like very clear markers of progress. And, you know, to your point earlier, there's opportunities in going to the gym for emotional growth.
Sure.
You know, and for sort of emotional and psychological change. I think there is. I mean, yeah, I think I probably had some growth in there. One of the things that I really learned through the gym process, like a heavy gym process, like it was for that, is a lesson I always come back to, which is that like my brain is generally not my friend. And I had this experience so many times where there was different days I had different workout routines. 2 of the days I would have like a really, really heavy workout, and then it would end with like several sets of back-to-back push-ups and pull-ups.
Oh,
so I'd already be exhausted.
Yeah.
And I'm way heavier trying to do pull-ups, right?
Yeah.
And I remember one day walking up to the pull-up bar and my head going, no fucking way. No fucking way.
Yeah.
And the benefit that you get through going through a physical change and process for work is that the excuses your brain makes are irrelevant because you have a job to do. And so it's interesting to have that process with working out because you really learn how in the way your brain can be. And I remember walking up to this pull-up bar and being like, no fucking way. And literally every pull-up, I was like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I can't do it. Like over and over again. It's like, it's also, your brain doesn't know that it's okay if you can't do it. Like your brain doesn't know that it's okay if you can't do it.
Yeah.
And so your brain is trying to protect you from having the experience of trying something and it not working.
Totally.
And working your body to failure.
Yes.
Your brain is trying to protect you from having that experience, but it doesn't know better.
Right.
It doesn't know that it's okay
That's
for you to be it's okay for you to start out bad at something.
Yes.
It's actually more than okay, it's essential.
It's essential.
You have to actually be really bad at something new.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to sort of fail miserably.
Yep.
In order to get remotely good at it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's like you can find shortcuts and cheats to everything. And I know, unfortunately, tons of actors who do this through whatever process that they're having, where they're creating safety nets for themselves because they don't want to have the experience of trying their hardest and it not working out.
Yes.
And so, like, they'd rather kind of try and fail, and then go like, I didn't really try. We're in a very uncertain business, so we're also surrounded by people who are trying to make sense of something that doesn't have a lot of sense to it. And we're also at a time where a lot of people, not just in this industry, are broke.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of poor people who are in survival mode, who don't know how they're going to make enough money to keep the life that they have gotten really used to having. And that's not to say that it's a luxurious life that these people have had. It's just where they live and the communities they live in, especially if you're in New York or you're in LA and you're in our business. It's like your whole community exists here, but goddamn is it expensive.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to have that financial experience and not try to intellectually make sense of it. And there's an essential part of that process that probably actually needs your brain to try to resolve it.
Yes.
And so that's really tricky because to survive, most likely, you have to sometimes use your brain for certain tasks.
Absolutely.
And then you have to tell it to shut the fuck up otherwise.